Without further ado, I will now present today's speakers. Welcome and thank you very much for joining us today. Thilo Schmid, Head of Digitalcheck Department of Bavarian State Ministry of Digital Affairs, and I'm Katrien van Liere, Project Lead at Bavarian Digitalcheck Team, Bavarian Agency for Digital Affairs. Thank you very much for joining us today, and Thilo, over to you.
Thank you and good morning. Dear colleagues, dear Eva, thank you for the warm welcome and your interest. It is our pleasure and honor to be able to present ourselves and our concept here today. We, that are Anne-Kathrin van Leure and myself, Thilo Schmid. Anne-Kathrin, or Annie, is the project manager for the digital check at the Bavarian Digital Agency, BITE. She's part of our team for 1.5 years now. And she has a bachelor's degree in politics and public administration and a master's degree in cyber politics. So she's an expert for the intersection between politics and the understanding of new technologies. Myself, I'm a lawyer. I've worked as judge in the past, and I've been with the Ministry of Digital Affairs for almost 4 years now, heading the digital check department for the last 2 years. Here you can already see one of our challenges, but also the secret of our success. Our team, we have 6 in total, comes from 2 different organizations. Our hip and modern digital agency BITE on the one hand, and the more traditional Ministry of Digital Affairs on the other. And we also come from very different educational backgrounds. Lawyers from the ministry and digitalization experts from the BITE. However, the fact that we have managed to form a team out of these differences and also present ourselves as such a team to the outside opens many doors for us and creates trust. We are seen by the other ministries as part of the state government and therefore as equals. Yet at the same time, we can provide important impetus from the outside. But back to today's agenda. We see it on this slide here. We want to share with you what we do and how we do it. It's about digital-ready legislation and how we support our colleagues in other ministries in developing appropriate drafts. At this point, a clarification of terms. In Germany, we call the officials who write the draft laws Legisten. We haven't found a real equivalent in English, maybe it's legists. So we've decided to call them lawmakers here. Not to be confused with the legislators in the state structure, the parliament. Our target group is the advisors on the offices in the ministries. I would now like to say a few introductory words about the Bavarian Digital Check, after which Annie, who speaks much better English than I do, will present our standardized approach to regulatory support and show you a practical example. We will also give you a brief insight what else we have to offer and what we consider to be the most important lessons learned from 2 years of digital check in Bavaria. So let's start with the Bavarian Digital Check. As I said, we've been around for almost exactly 2 years now. We started our work in February 2024. And as I also said, our aim is to create digital-ready state law in Bavaria. In federal Germany, there are federal laws, of course, and there are state laws. And since federal law is usually enforced by the states, in addition, there are also many state laws for the execution of federal law. We'll take a look at these 2, of course. We are convinced that digital-ready regulations are essential for a modern digital state. Only if the laws allow and enable digital enforcement, a meaningful digital implementation can take place. Digital-ready means, on the one hand, that there are no barriers to digitization, especially nothing that prevents or hinders digital enforcement. On the other hand, it also means that the use of digital solutions should already be positively enabled by law. While obstacles can be identified quite quickly when reading the laws, enabling them is somewhat more difficult. You don't see at first sight when something is missing. And it also takes a lot of work to think about this right from the start, which is why we want to take our colleagues by the hand on the way there. In both Bavaria and the federal level, the vast majority of laws are based on drafts submitted to Parliament by the government. This is probably even more the case in Bavaria. The drafts, in turn, are written in the relevant ministries, as I mentioned earlier, by the lawmakers. Over the past 2 years, we have managed to build trust and competence. We impart knowledge, methods, and skills. We are perceived as partners on an equal footing and can thus change mindsets. But what mindsets are we talking about? Until now, the implementation of a law has often left to the various levels of administration. There was a political idea or guideline which became law, and the administration somehow implemented it. And in the past, it didn't matter at all whether the form was red in municipality A and green in municipality B. It was filled in by hand, and when a citizen moved, he or she had to transfer it from green to red. But that no longer works with digital solutions. They have to be compatible or interoperable with each other so that data can flow automatically and can be processed automatically. And if that wasn't already considered in the law, it becomes really difficult in practice afterwards. And that's exactly where we come in with our digital check. You've seen that on the next slide. Even before the draft bill is introduced, we think about implementation and digital enforcement. We look at what happens to citizens, what companies suffer from, and what challenges the administration faces in implementation. It's all about optimizing processes before they are digitized. If you digitize a bad process, you get a bad digital process. To give our lawmakers an idea of where the journey should take them, we provide them with our 7 principles. These are intended less as a checklist, but more as an impetus for a change in mindset. And to be honest, I'm not very convinced by checklists. Most people see them as an unnecessary bureaucracy and often only fill them in after the fact anyway. And between us, any moderately talented lawyer can always argue that they complied with all requirements of a checklist, or that they were unfortunately unable to comply due to very special circumstances. So we do not provide a checklist or requiring accompanying documentation. We just give the impetus to take our principles into account from the very beginning in the interest of good legislation. The principles themselves should be self-explanatory to you as a specialist audience, so I will not present them all individually. And if any one of you has ever dealt with the digital checks of Denmark or the federal German government, you will also recognize certain similarities. At our beginning, we naturally took inspiration from what already existed, and we still do that today. But enough about theory and our goals. How we are going to implement this in concrete terms, especially how we are going to get our lawmakers on board and how we are going to support them, I will now hand over to Annie. Thank you so far.
Thank you, Thilo, for handing over. So as Thilo explained, we want to help lawmakers in Bavaria in drafting digital-ready laws. And in order to achieve this, we, as a Digitalcheck, operate in 2 different stages, as you can see here on the slide. So on the right hand, you have the stage 2, which is actually mandatory in Bavaria. And it says that every new law in Bavaria is actually screened for digitalization barriers in their draft phase by the Digitalcheck team since 2024. So the central office for the Digitalcheck in the ministry reviews all new laws regarding their digital readiness. And here we can give some suggestions to remove remaining barriers to digitalization. So at this point, we can give some recommendations for amendments to the draft law in order to ensure its digital compatibility. And this is a very important step at the second stage. However, at this point of time, where the screening process happens, the law has already been drafted and passed the political consolidation process. So at this point, only very small changes to the law itself are still possible, and the draft law cannot be fundamentally altered anymore. So that's why, in addition to the second stage, we have implemented stage 1 as an addition beforehand. So at that point, before the law has been drafted already, we actively want to support the lawmakers already during the process of drafting the law. So here at this stage 1, we want to guide the lawmakers to draft laws that are digital ready and are designed in accordance with the 7 principles that Thilo just explained. So at this stage 1, you can see here on the left side, it is voluntary. So the lawmakers are not obliged to include us as the Digitalcheck, but we encourage them to do so, as we have developed a broad and comprehensive support package that helps them to draft a law that is very digital ready in the end. And we have developed different support services, for example, the training courses, a process visualization kit, starter package, as well as an individual consulting service. And I will explain every one of them later on during this webinar more in detail. But just to say a few words on this consulting service, because it's a very important part of our Digitalcheck. So here we have individual case consultations, where we assist lawmakers in drafting a specific law with expertise in service design, process design, and IT development. So here we consult the ministries on a specific law they are working on. And in sum, all of these different support services in stage 1, we hope to help the lawmakers in such a way that they create a draft law that then later in the stage 2 does not present any obstacles to digital implementation anymore. So hopefully with our support, we have a draft law in the end that can easily pass the screening process in stage 2. So we have this functioning of those 2 stages working together. So to sum it up, what are we offering in the Digitalcheck? We offer trainings for lawmakers. We offer active support through individual case consulting services to develop a digital-ready law. We act as a knowledge hub, and we offer also practical guidance to lawmakers. And then at stage 2, we also examine and screen all the draft laws regarding the digital readiness, and can give here some suggestions on how to improve the digital readiness of the law. So that's what we do in total, but let me explain a little bit further what we do with our individual standardized consulting service. So here we have individual case consultations where we assist lawmakers from different ministries in drafting or amending a specific law. So here we can answer technical questions with expertise, for example, in the areas of process design, user orientation, and IT development, and also legal advice. We also organize interactive workshops that bring together stakeholders affected by the law, as well as those involved in the law drafting process. And we oftentimes support the ministries in visualizing administrative processes that result from the proposed new law. So as Thilo said before in the beginning, a law always results into an administrative process that then results in a service towards the citizens. And we not only want to have a look at the law itself, but also have a look at the administrative process standing behind the law that results from the law and how it affects, for example, the citizens. And in order to do that, we oftentimes do visualizations. I will come to that later on as well, in order to understand the administrative processes that are discussed. And this helps also the lawmakers to communicate better externally what their process looks like, for example, during further political coordination. And what are we doing now specifically during these consulting services? So we always follow a standardized approach for each individual consultation. And once a ministry gets in touch with us because they are working currently on a new law, we always arrange a first meeting, which we call 360-degree framing. And here we define the extent of the Digitalcheck consultation, and we also define the desired results. So what exactly does the ministry need from us, from the Digitalcheck, in order to help them? And once we have defined that together, we enter the analysis phase. And here we always do a practice exploration, where we include elements of qualitative research. So for example, we have a look at how other countries or other states in Germany handle this process and what they have written in the law. And we want here to identify and understand different user needs and requirements. And then as the next step, we do a process analysis based on the insights generated from the practice exploration. We develop process visualizations together with the different stakeholders. So we have regular meetings with for example, the lawmakers, in order to get their input and feedback, and then we adjust the visualization going forward. So it's quite a dynamic and interactive process, and exploration and analysis go hand in hand and also sometimes in parallel. So we always get some input, then we develop a visualization, then we go to the ministry and show it to them and get their feedback, and then adjust the visualization going forward. Sometimes we also do a practice evaluation in the end, where we obtain input from experts to evaluate the final visualized process. And then we ask them to what extent the process meets their requirements. And we involve also different stakeholders here. And then in the end, we go to the handover, and here we have a final meeting with the lawmakers, with the ministry, and we decide. Or sometimes have some final legal consulting, and then we hand over all developed materials and the visualizations that we have developed, and then the lawmakers can start working on the actual legal text. But what we have realized is that this process takes quite some time. So, for example, we have worked together with ministries over several months on one topic and one law. And this stands a bit in contrast to the law drafting process, which is often very fast-paced, and there's oftentimes not a lot of time or resources to dive that deep into each and every topic. So what we've done is we have developed this standardized process that I just outlined, but it can easily be adjusted when needed. So what we always do is the framing in the beginning, because it's an integral part that lays the foundation for the whole consulting process, because here we define what we will develop together and what the results will be. But then the analysis phase can vary greatly, and the depth of our consultation, and for example, the amount of work sessions that we have here in the analysis phase varies greatly. And this is also depicted by this slide here. So you can see we have different sizes for our support package, and which include different elements. I will not go too much into detail what we can offer specifically, but just to give you an impression that our support can range from 1 to 2 weeks, just quickly having a check with them, checking in on the topic and giving some guidance, up to several months where we accompany ministries on one specific law and the process behind it. So the depth of our consulting service varied greatly, and for example, also the amount of interviews and work sessions that we are doing with the ministries and the stakeholders. So let me explain a little bit further what we mean with our 360-degree framing. So here we look at the topic and the law from all angles. We have developed this template that we always use in every framing meeting. And we always start here on the top and then go around clockwise and cover every aspect. And here the objective is to clarify the requirements and our assignment for the Digitalcheck team. So together with the lawmakers, we define what the ministry needs from us and what would help them best. For example, sometimes they just need some legal support from us. Other times they need a visualization, such as a stakeholder map or a process visualization. And at the end, we have where we define this together, and then at the end we have a comprehensive understanding of the topic together and what the lawmakers need from us from the Digitalcheck. And we usually take 2 to 3 hours just to cover this this framing template with them together. So let me explain a little bit further what exactly we are talking about during these 2 to 3 hours. So as a first step, we define the problem statement. So we discuss why are we here today, what is the topic we are talking about, what law are we referring to, and then we ask them who is involved in the administrative process resulting from the law, directly as well as indirectly, and who also influences it. And then we develop together with the lawmakers a preliminary stakeholder map. As a next step, we have a look at where the process starts and if there are any processes beforehand that we need to consider that influence the process we are talking about. Then also we have a look at the aim of the process and the endpoint. So where does the administrative process end? Then we always ask what kind of resources there exist that we can have a look at. For example, some existing laws or regulations, some information already collected. So what do we know already? As well as what don't we know yet and what relevant information is still missing. So what are our blind spots where we have to look a bit deeper. Then we also discuss the dependencies and the political dimension and the frame conditions. So what dependencies exist, for example, with other institutions, other ministries and other administrative processes. And then we always ask if there are still some questions left that we haven't discussed. And then we finally discuss together with the lawmakers, what are your hopes for our collaboration and what would you like to achieve with our input from the Digitalcheck, and we together define the desired end results from our consulting service. So that's what we do during this framing, which lays the foundation for the whole consulting service. And then I'd like to give you an understanding of what the results can be from these individual consulting processes. So as I said, we oftentimes use visualizations as a tool and support for the lawmakers. So depending on the case and the law we're working on, we develop different visualization tools. For example, we develop a stakeholder map that contains a systematic list of all involved persons and groups. We can also do a ecosystem map that together with the stakeholders also includes technical systems and non-human entities. We can also show data flows and, for example, from which government agency data has to flow to another one in order that the administrative process works. We also do sometimes so-called user typology where we highlight various cases and groups of people, and we give them names and faces and stories. And we do this to evoke empathy and showing that there are real people behind the various cases being affected by the law and the administrative process resulting from it. So here we help the lawmakers to grasp better who is affected by the law they are currently drafting. And then we can sometimes also do a flowchart or process visualization, where we illustrate step by step the process we are talking about, and sometimes also for different users. And here we can also highlight front stage, backstage, or backend if a technical system or application is involved in the administrative process. We can also show where the data flows. So, for example, who needs to hand over what kind of data to whom and when. What we also can do here is to mark and highlight potential for improvement and digitalization. So while we map the current process, we can already consult the ministry and say, for example, that there is a step that is done twice, or the citizen has to hand in data twice, and we ask them if we can streamline and simplify this. And we can do this illustration for the current process, but sometimes we also illustrate the proposed future administrative process together with the ministry. But this is all a bit theoretical at the moment. So we thought about bringing an actual case we were just working on recently, so we can see an actual example of what the results can be from our individual consulting service. So let me introduce you to our case here. So we have worked together with a ministry that oversees the program to finance kindergartens in Bavaria. And this is quite a complex process at the moment, because it includes two financing bodies, one the municipality, and then we have a part that is government funded. So we have two institutions financing, and of course both want to be involved and check the funding process separately. And we have also various stakeholders involved in this process, as we will see in a minute. Now the ministry wants to digitalize and simplify this process, and they want to adapt the current law that regulates this process. And here we came into play as the Digitalcheck, and we supported the ministry with 2 different visualizations and several work sessions. And together we have developed an ecosystem map as well as a process visualization for them. And the goal here from our involvement was to identify all those involved in the process and to map them within the specific process steps. So the ministry gets an understanding who they need to involve. And then we also created an overview of the procedural steps that take place and illustrate the current process, how a kindergarten receives funding. And this then could be used by the ministry for further political consolidation when drafting the law. And this involvement also helped to identify potential for improvement within this current process. And we identified that the use of a central web platform, web application would be useful and would be helping everyone. But let me dive deeper into these exemplified results that we have produced. So I will not go too much into detail for the illustration itself, but we just wanted you to get an understanding of the logic behind it. So we have developed this ecosystem map where you can see several stakeholders as well as a technical perspective. So here in the middle, you can see the kindergarten itself, or respectively the responsible body for the kindergarten who needs to apply for the funding. And here it sits in the middle of the illustration because it's the most important player, of course, in the process of receiving funding. Then here you have a different kind of governmental stakeholders. We have the district office as well as the municipality who both together finance the kindergarten. And then on the bottom here, you can see also the ministry we were working with, who is in charge of the funding program, but otherwise it is not involved in the administrative process resulting from the law. So it is not involved in the funding process itself. That is why you can see it here in the bottom. And you can see the line we drew. And then it means below the line, it's an invisible process that cannot be seen by the users, by the kindergarten itself. But still, of course, they are affected by it. So that's the logic behind this line. And then here we also integrated a technical perspective. As I said, we identified that there a central web application where this funding process can be done is really useful here. And we showed this to the ministry as well. And here you can see the technical system, which runs, of course, in a data center, also depicted here. And there's a responsible IT service provider from a private company that is responsible for the maintenance of the system and, for example, also offers a hotline for customers. So we have depicted them as stakeholders here as well. And you can see the interface to different web services as well that the kindergarten also uses. So you can see it's quite a complex ecosystem, but this visualization helped the ministry to understand those affected by the law and the involved process behind it. And as a next step, we also developed a process visualization to map all these stakeholders within this process. And you can see here 3 different layers in the illustration. On the first level on the top, you can see the main process. So this line shows the administrative process for the main stakeholders. So for example, what the kindergarten must do in order to receive funding. Then on the second line, the second layer, you see what happens in the background at administrative level. So for example, at the enforcement authority, so who has to do what at administrative level. And then we also included here a third layer. It depicts what happens automatically by the system that we proposed. So I will just quickly go through the illustration so that you get an understanding of the process. So first, as a first step, the responsible body for the kindergarten applies for an operating license. So you can see here on the left side. The process starts here once the kindergarten applies for an operating license, because this is the prerequisite to receive the funding in the first place. Then, as a second step, once the operating license has been granted, the kindergarten credentials are automatically inserted into a web platform so that we have an automatic data transfer here. This is why it transfers into the third line here in the illustration. And this is in accordance with the Digitalcheck principle, because automatic data transfer, of course, also prevents misuse and fraud, and also mistakes, of course. And then as a third step, the kindergarten must add some specific data into the system that the system cannot know yet. So for example, the amount of children attending the kindergarten, because this influences the amount of funding they get. Then as a fourth step, the web application automatically calculates the preliminary amount of funding and gives this information to the kindergarten. And then at that point, the municipality gets involved and it checks the municipal share for the funding. So here we have the municipality involved and as one funding agency. But as I mentioned before, we have two funding agencies. So normally the second one, the government agency, also wanted to check the funding process separately. But we have identified here potential for simplification, because we have identified that there's no need for an additional second review process here. And we said the government agency can trust the municipality and automatically approve the grant as well, and only do some randomized checks for control. So in general, not every application is checked twice, which makes the process, of course, more efficient and less time consuming. Then as a next step, the payment is made for the whole sum at the end of the year. Of course, during the year, if there are any changes to the data inserted into the system, the kindergarten needs to update them into the web platform. And then at the end, this software automatically performs some plausibility checks, and not all cases, but around 5% of the cases are checked manually again for verification. And this again saves costs and working time for the administration, as not every case has to be checked fully, but only some plausibility checks. And with this, we have come to the right side here of the process, and the administrative process to fund the kindergartens is completed with this. So what we have achieved also thanks to our involvement was to identify potential for digitalization and simplification in the existing administrative process to fund kindergartens. Now we have identified the data could be automatically inserted into the web platform, so no additional step and work needed for the kindergarten. We have identified that there's not two review processes needed. So again, we can save some time and some steps here, and the plausibility check in the end done by the web application itself again saves time and costs and can also prevent misuse and fraud. So here you can see as well the Digitalcheck principles applied. So to sum up, our involvement has revealed some digital opportunities in the existing process and some potential for simplification here. We cannot say too much about the draft law itself because it's still currently undergoing internal consultation in Bavaria. But we can say we have, together with the ministry, developed a nice and digitally compatible process in the end with our involvement. So this was quite a little bit of information and on how we do it in our individual consulting service. But we'd also like to share with you what else we offer here in Bavaria and what other tools and services we can provide for the lawmakers, in addition to these individual, very deep and in-depth consultation services. So what we also do is training courses. We currently offer 2 different training courses to public servants who are drafting laws. So it's offered to all lawmakers in the Bavarian ministries. So there's no need that they currently work on a specific law, as is the case with the individual case consultations I just explained. So here in the trainings, everyone can attend, whether they work on a specific law at the moment or not. And we offer two different courses. The first one is called Introduction to Digital Ready Legislation. And here we give an overview of the Bavarian Digitalcheck and what we can offer as support tools. We also dive deeper into the topic of digital ready legislation, and we explain the 7 principles Thilo has introduced in the beginning, and show the lawmakers how these principles can guide them when drafting a law, so that in the end they have a digital ready law. And here in this first training course, we also demonstrate what process-oriented thinking entails and show the added value that visualization can have as a method on the drafting of the law. Then we realized that there's quite some need from the lawmakers' side for more in-depth introduction to the method of visualization, because after the first training course, they came to us and said, it's really we see the added value behind it, but we don't know how we can use this and how we can apply it in our daily work. So that's why we developed a second training course, which is called Introduction to Process Visualization as a Useful Tool when Drafting Digital Ready Laws. And this is a methodological focus, and we show process visualization as a valuable tool for the legislative process. We introduce various tools of visualization and guide the participants on how to use it in their daily work. And it's quite an interactive and hands-on case training course here, as we have also included a case study that is a bit dangerous too, so to say, because we talk about a fictitious law in Germany to register a dragon. So if you want to know how it's done, you have to attend a training course from us. And here we ask the participants to map all involved stakeholders and visualize the current process to register a dragon in Bavaria, which apparently is quite a complex and non-digital process in the moment. So it provides quite some opportunity for improvement. So participants can playfully learn to use the new methods and to develop a digital-ready law step by step. What we also offer is quite a new addition to our support package is the so-called Process Visualization Kit. And it's just arrived 1 or 2 weeks ago, so it's really new. And it is actually a cardboard box full of templates, materials, and instructions. And we have designed it in a kit format with variable modules that can be combined as needed. So you can see here on the picture, the cardboard box includes different templates and materials that can be used based on what is needed. So for example, you can create a stakeholder map, and it gives you step-by-step instructions and all the materials you need in order to create a stakeholder map yourself. So it is meant as a low threshold entry into the visualization of processes, and it is meant as a spin-off to our process visualization trainings. Because the idea is that the participants from our trainings can contact us if they are currently working on a draft law, and then they can get this kit, this visualization kit, and they can start working on the visualization and visualize the stakeholders and the administrative process that results from this law. So here, our aim is to enable and capacitate the lawmakers so that they can develop digital-ready solutions independently by themselves with the help of this visualization as a method. Because as we said, you can see that some steps are not needed anymore, for example, or the data can be used from another government agency already. So the visualization is a really helpful tool to understand the administrative process and to make it more user-friendly, more digital, and simplify it. Last but not least, we also have a so-called starter package, which at the moment is a PDF file that can be downloaded freely. It includes an introduction to the Digitalcheck, as well as the 7 principles and some information on how to get started. But we decided last year that we want to update this startup package, and the concept is therefore at the moment adjusted based on some user research, because last year we conducted interviews with different lawmakers in Bavaria, and we asked them, what do you really need? What is still missing? What would help you in drafting a digital-ready law? And then based on their input, we are currently developing a new concept for the startup package, which caters best the needs for these lawmakers. And it is not meant as a PDF file anymore, but rather meant as a dynamic and interactive website with practical examples and tips on how to develop a digital-ready law, also a guidance for the 7 principles and in-depth explanations and a provision of the relevant information. But more information will come later this year once we have finally developed it. So we have talked now in depth what exactly we offer to the lawmakers from the Digitalcheck team. What we also wanted to share with you were some lessons learned, because we have now had 2 years of Digitalcheck in Bavaria, and we have quite some lessons that we have learned during these past 2 years. So what we realized, as Thilo also said in the beginning already, is that interdisciplinary teams are a real asset. So in the Digitalcheck in Bavaria, we work together as jurists, project managers, service designer, process analysts, and technical experts. So everyone coming from a different angle and having a different perspectives. And we challenge each other and together develop the best solution. So this is a really asset that we have defined. Then a second lesson, we found that the 360-degree framing that I introduced is really helpful to understand the topic and issue at hand with all its aspects. So we really get a comprehensive understanding of the law and the administrative process. And the lawmakers realize that they don't have to worry we forget something, as we really guide them step by step through and dive deeper into every aspect of the law. And then the standardized process that we have developed for the individual case consultation has also proved very helpful. Because now we can explain better to the lawmakers what exactly we are offering them. Because our consulting service, in the beginning, it seemed quite long-lasting and complex and overwhelming for the lawmakers. And they oftentimes said to us, we don't have that much time or resources. We would like to do it, but we don't have the time to do it. Because it seemed very complex and extensive to them. So this hampered them to get in touch with us and to get the support from the Digitalcheck team. But once we have standardized the process and framed the service into these different packages that I explained before, which is a bit similar to the mobile tariff system, where you can choose a package that suits you best. Once we have introduced this, we could communicate much better to the lawmakers what we can offer and explain to them that it can be also very short-term involvement and doesn't necessarily have to be over months. Then we have also identified that stakeholder management is really important for us. It's important that we always stay in contact with the lawmakers, and we actually see them as our clients from the Digitalcheck, and we always ask them constantly regarding their needs and feedback. So we constantly re-evaluate our services and products and reiterate them to cater best to the needs. So we evolve our services we have evolved our services over the past 2 years. And this also leads me to the point of service orientation and thinking. So we see lawmakers as our clients, and we want to adjust our services best to what they need. And we constantly evaluate our product. So over the past 2 years, we have continuously complemented and adjusted the product product portfolio. So as you saw, the process visualization kit is the newest addition to our portfolio. So we constantly add and adjust our products. And what is important here for us is also that we are not perceived as additional work for the lawmakers, because they have already a lot on their plate and not a lot of time to do it. So we don't want to be seen as additional work, but rather as a support for them during the process of drafting a law and actively helping them based on what they actually need. And last but not least, in the beginning, once we started with the Digitalcheck 2 years ago, we were faced with the question on how to raise awareness that there is now the Digitalcheck available, and how to get in contact with lawmakers. Because the Digitalcheck was put into place, but then at that point, nobody knew in the ministries that there's now a central office supporting them in the process of drafting laws. So what we did then was to develop an introductory session, and we really went from ministry to ministry and showed our faces, introduced the project and our service, and explained to them how we can help them. And this proved very good in the end, because now the ministries and the lawmakers know us already, and they are less hesitant to get in contact with us once they have a law on their table that they are drafting. It was really good in the beginning to get in contact with the lawmakers and to also establish trust to the Digitalcheck.